Let's talk about Islam, tradition, and decolonization. I can't think of a better place to talk about these very important topics than where I am now, the northern point of Morocco, on the southern side of the Strait of Gibraltar. My name is Dr. Jason Idriss Sparkes, exploring visions of beauty and excellence in Islamic contexts with you.
The Strait of Gibraltar is a crucial location within the contemporary global system, what we might call the modern colonial world system. It simultaneously connects and separates the Atlantic Ocean from the Mediterranean, Morocco from Spain, Europe from Africa, and in some people's minds, Islam and the West. It has a fascinating history related to international trade, global capitalism, Islamic expansion into the West and the Mediterranean zone, European imperial and colonial expansion into Africa, and as a stepping stone for global expansion. It's a very important zone right now and historically. And the sites that we're going to see in this video are all strategically and historically important in understanding the story of Islam, tradition, and colonialism and decolonization.
Behind me is the amazing Jabal Musa, the mountain of Musa. This is the mountain which is right across from the Rock of Gibraltar on the Moroccan side. And it has an amazing history. I want to tell you about this history and how it connects and how it can help us understand right here from the field in northern Morocco, how the history, the geography, the culture, the experiences, the daily lived experience of people in this region can help us as Muslims, as well as non-Muslims, understand the importance of tradition and the importance of decolonization. So we're gonna go up that road that winds all the way up to that mountain. All right, if you follow that road, you'll have the city of Ceuta, Sabta. And then if you go up the mountain, on the other side of the mountain, you're gonna get to a point where you can very clearly see, once you're at the top of the mountain. In fact, when you're from Ceuta as well, you can very clearly see the southern coast of Spain and the Rock of Gibraltar. And then if you continue, you see the great port of Tangier Mediterranean. And if you continue along that road, you'll get all the way to Tangier. So these are beautiful, spectacular Mediterranean scenes, which I think can inspire us to understand how important it is to preserve the diversity, the beauty, and the magnificence of life in all of its natural and human forms against any sort of system, including any modern colonial ideologies, which would seek to destroy such traditions, such diversity, such life forms. And this is very important to us, of course, as Muslims. If you wind along, you'll end up going eastward along the coast. You go towards Algeria and whatnot, but those are the mountains of the reef that you see in the background there. We're in the city of Fnideq here, which is the first city you get to when you enter Morocco from the Spanish African territory of Ceuta, Sabta, which is right behind Jabal Musa. On the distance beyond Fnideq, you have all the beach territory. Beyond that, you have the city of Fnideq, Rincon, and beyond that, you have Tétouan, all of which were once Spanish colonies. So you have a real Spanish influence. Wonderful cultural intermingling. So what does all of this have to do with Islam, tradition, and decolonization? Well, we need to take our time. This is field work. We're in North Africa, my friends. Beautiful weather, it's the summer, and we need to really take our time to understand. What I'm proposing here is not some ideological or even nation-based sort of militant project. I'm thinking about a deeper decolonial reflection, which has to do with life forms and cultures and nuance and the importance of preserving life forms seen from a Muslim perspective. So to understand really these connections, I'm not saying there are no political projects, I'm just saying that this is not the approach I'm taking here. So what I'm proposing to you is a little bit of history so we can understand how these ideas play out here in this geography, in this historical zone, before we can really talk about the ideas themselves. They'll be anchored in the beautiful images I'm going to show you, the beautiful history, the sometimes difficult history, the geography. Don't worry, it's not all going to be me here sitting here talking to you, but it is going to be a discussion in which we get down to the real ideas about coloniality, modernity, tradition, and Islam, anchored in a deep understanding of place, of history, of people, of life.
Let's get some basic dates down to understand the significance of this region. In the year 711, the Amazigh, that is indigenous North African general, Tariq Ibn Ziyad, who was from Tangier at the western extremity of the Strait of Gibraltar on the Moroccan side, he crossed over into what is now Spain by boat with an army of Muslims. He was a recently converted Muslim, and his army had many indigenous North African soldiers, as well as soldiers from Arabia, Arabian Muslims. He was under the command of an Arabian Muslim called Musa ibn Nusayr. Musa ibn Nusayr watched the ships of Tariq ibn Ziyad and his army cross the Strait of Gibraltar. As tradition has it, he watched this from the top of the mountain we now call Jabal Musa. The mountain is named after him. In 711, the crossing of the Muslim army into Europe would begin the Muslim rule over parts of southwestern Europe. The first place they arrived was the Rock of Gibraltar. In fact, the name Gibraltar comes from Tariq ibn Ziyad's name. In Arabic, Gibraltar is called Jabal, the mountain, Tariq of Tariq, the mountain of Tariq ibn Ziyad. Muslims began the conquest of large parts of southwestern Europe. They made it eventually all the way to southern France, much of southern Italy eventually, right? And Mediterranean islands came under Muslim rule. For long periods of time, Muslims were in what is now Spain and Portugal. In fact, the Muslims stayed from 711 until 1492 as ruling power over parts of this region. By 1492, the last Muslim ruler in the region was in Granada. When he was defeated, that was the end of the last Muslim polity in southwestern Europe. So 711, it's from Jabal Musa that Musa ibn Nusayr is looking at Tariq ibn Ziyad cross into what is now called Gibraltar. At the bottom of that mountain is the city of Ceuta, Sabta. Actually, the Arabic name for it now, Sabta, is closer to the older Latin name, because this was many civilizations have come through these lands and waters. Sabta comes from Septem Fratres, the seven brothers, which is what the Romans used to call the region. Apparently, there's many explanations. One of them could be that it's the seven peaks of the mountains or the seven peaks of Jabal Musa that you see when you're coming in from the Mediterranean side. But that's another story. Anyway, Sabta, Ceuta, in 1415, it is the site of the first expansion of Europeans into Africa in what we can call the modern period, or the leading up to the modern period. Okay, this is 1415. A Portuguese naval fleet with ships and supplies from nearly all of Catholic Europe under the authorization of the Pope. They begin what can be called, or what was called actually, and what they considered to be an African crusade. They cross the Strait of Gibraltar and they take over the city and port of Ceuta, Sabta. This actually cuts off the southern Spanish Islamic Emirate in Granada from Africa and all of the trade routes that connect it to the rest of Islamdom. And a few decades later, in 1492, the joint forces of Castile and Aragon will come down and take over Granada and kick out the last Muslim ruler. When they do that, Christopher Columbus is present in the area. He's looking at the battle on the invitation of the Catholic monarchs. And once the Catholics have taken over Granada, they, a few months later, authorize Christopher Columbus to cross the Atlantic westward. So 1492 will represent the defeat of the Muslims in Spain and the conquest, the beginning of the conquest of the Americas. And from the perspective of decolonial world systems analysis, 1492 is the symbolic birth of modernity. Now, the taking of Ceuta for the Portuguese will be the first stepping stone in a series of little conquests along the African coast, all the way down to South Africa, which will allow the Portuguese to establish the first major European modern empire. From these ports that they take over and conquer and settle along the African coast, they will be able to reach by sea India, Asia, and eventually westward, of course, across the Atlantic, where we still have Portuguese-speaking people in Brazil. So right here, Jabal Musa is the site of the first Muslim expansion into Europe and the site of the first European counter-expansion into Africa, which is a necessary stepping stone to the eventual globalization of modern European colonialism. And so this area here is the first site of resistance to modern European colonial and imperial expansion. It's one of the first sites. You have the Canary Islands and eventually the Americas, but 1415, Ceuta is the place where it really begins. And so in this region, you have, I think, a tragic history, but also a certain maturity when it comes to relations between Europeans and Christians and Jews and Muslims, because they've been working through these things for a long time. There's conflict, but there's also cohabitation, coexistence. The city of Ceuta right now and the Moroccan cities around it are all amazing places with amazing people of several ethnicities and languages and faiths. But the point is that in these parts, we have seen, if you wish, this very important development. And also in the modern colonial world system, as it progresses, the Strait of Gibraltar becomes extremely important as until today, it is a huge percentage of the world's cargo, right? Commercial cargo goes east and west through the Strait of Gibraltar. Many Africans and people from the global south try to make it into the west or into the global north through Ceuta or by crossing the Strait of Gibraltar. And they do so with extremely multi-billion-dollar resistance from the European Union. Simultaneously, people with European passports or passports from richer countries, such as my own, Canada, can cross from Spain into North Africa without any resistance because, of course, they come with powerful passports and powerful money, strong currencies. And so you see how it is a passage for some people, but it is a barrier for others. And all of this is part of modern colonial power dynamics. Interestingly, although Ceuta was the first territory in North Africa to be conquered by Catholic European forces, it would take centuries. It would take until 1912, which is basically 5 centuries later, until the Europeans actually established colonial rule in the form of a protectorate. So it's a fairly loose type of colonial rule, but it was colonialism. In 1912, they established colonial rule over what is now Morocco. The northern part, the part we're speaking about here, was colonized by Spain, as was much of the Sahara Desert in the south. The middle part was colonized by France. And the protectorate only lasted until 1956. So interestingly, despite being right at the border of resistance between the expanding European order and the rest of the world, if you're the border between the West and the rest, this zone was not actually formally colonized until 5 centuries after this initial attack or conquest. Today, interestingly, this place which was first occupied, right, during the initial expansion, 6 centuries later, more than 6 centuries later, Ceuta remains a European territory. It remains under the flag of Spain now, no longer Portugal. It's been Spanish for several centuries, and the flag of the European Union. To be honest, this is, for the time being, benefits the people. If you ask the Muslims in this region, be they in Ceuta or in the towns around them, I don't think they have any interest in seeing Ceuta become Moroccan overnight, perhaps over time. But right now, the presence of a European city right here in North Africa allows for many economic and family and social network benefits for the Muslims, as well as, I imagine, the Christians, although it seems to me economically Ceuta is probably a liability for mainland Spain right now. But anyway, it's a place of fascinating cohabitation. Ceuta is a wonderful city, and I'm not here to criticize the good people of the city of Ceuta. I'm speaking about the big picture of history.
All right, so now let's get down to the actual question of tradition, Islam, and decolonization. You see, when I first came to this part of the world 23 years ago, really this sort of border region with, you see, this amazing microcosm of the world system appeared to me and made me understand the world system, the system I was in, much better. Because you have the African side, right, in Morocco, and you see at the border, when somebody coming into the border, into the Spanish European side of Ceuta, right, the color of their skin, the language they're speaking, the passport they hold will determine very much how they will be received and how they will be let through. So a sub-Saharan African will not be received the same way as a Moroccan, and a Moroccan will not be received the same way as a European. Now, then there's the extra level of prestige, to a certain extent, of crossing from Ceuta into mainland Spain. There was even a different visa category. So there's levels to how close you can get into the West. Once you're in Ceuta, you're within the West, but you're still right in the West. And then when you get over to Spain, you're in the West now. You're officially in Spain, right? When you get over to Algeciras, for example, on the southern side. But as many decolonial world systems analysts, such as Walter Mignolo, have explained, actually Spain, after the original period, was eventually Southern Europe, and Spain and other parts of Southern Europe were sort of sent to what Walter Mignolo calls the semi-periphery. I would actually probably call it's still within the core of the world system, but it was sort of at the border between the core and the periphery. Because for Northern Europeans who became dominant in the modern colonial world system, Africa begins south of the Pyrenees, as the saying goes. Spain was already a little bit, in their view of the world, their unfortunate and racist view of the world, was dark and too tainted by Moorish, African, Muslim blood, etc. And so, things have gotten a lot better in Spain recently, but you're still not quite in the core of the world system, if you know what I mean. Now you get to Gibraltar, which is, now though that's the British now colonizing or establishing an exclave, if you wish, similar to Ceuta in North Africa. The British are establishing an exclave in Spain or in Iberia, right? The British would call it British territory, and I'm not going to get into an argument about that, but it's a similar situation. And the British, of course, they're the Anglo-Saxons. They're the top of the hierarchy of the culmination of the modern colonial world system. And so you see these hierarchies and how the Spanish laborers will go in and work in Gibraltar, for example, for a better salary, and how the Moroccans will go into Ceuta for a better salary, but even better if you go into Spain. And if from Spain you can make it to France or England, it'll be even better. So this is a real good place to see this, world system in its sort of very compressed form here in a border zone. And Walter Mignolo also speaks of border thinking, which helps you think about these things. So let's speak about these themes then. Islam, what does this have to do with Islam? Well, the modern colonial world system is a threat in many ways to marginalized communities, right? Including Muslims worldwide. And Islam, when I speak of Islam not as a geopolitical project. I speak of Islam as a way of approaching the real. The real in Islam is al-haq, it's Allah. Allah is the real, God is the real. And we approach the real through submission. And we believe that God is beautiful and that He loves beauty. And that yes, there are moments for fighting and justice, but in Islamic theology and in the scriptures, God's mercy, right, has preeminence or has the primary importance over His wrath, right? God is all merciful. God is beautiful. He loves beauty. And so the tradition I am speaking of is a tradition of beauty and of life. God is al-hayy. He is the living, right? And what we are protecting it from in this case, what we want to perpetuate when we want to protect or perpetuate our tradition is this beautiful, diverse, life-affirming tradition. Of course, Muslim history, like all other civilizations, is filled with immoral moments and conflict and moments of injustice and oppression. But we are looking at an ideal. And on the other side, we are not trying to, right, if we speak of Western imperialism or colonialism or the modern colonial world system, we're not fighting against, at least in what I'm proposing, we're not fighting against the life forms and the cultural forms and the languages and the people and the bloodlines of Europe, right? We're fighting against those aspects, those systemic aspects, which are not life-affirming, which lead to extinction, genocide, ecocide, the modern colonial world system. The adhan is in the back, so we're going to let the adhan finish and I'll come back. It's Asr time in Fnideq, right on one of the flanks of Jabal Musa. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So as I was saying, as a Western Muslim of European origin, I'm not trying to fight my origins, my people, my bloodline, my culture, my language. What I'm saying is that, like many people, I came to a conclusion early in life that the modern colonial system I was in, although I couldn't quite articulate it that way, was not satisfying me. It was not satisfactory. It was not leading me and my people and other peoples to the life, the beautiful life I thought, we were meant to live. And Islam appeared to me as a tradition which could serve my needs as a Westerner of European origin, and I believe the needs of people from all sorts of other origins at its best, despite the flaws of human beings. Islam is not a utopian worldview. It's a traditional worldview based in, practical applications of the ideals that come to us from metaphysics and theology. So I guess the question basically is there a dichotomy between traditionalism, right, tradition in Islam, and decolonization? And I'm here to say no. You see, this is one of the problems. Some Muslim thinkers privilege tradition and think we need to focus on beauty and metaphysics and theology and making ourselves, better human beings and closer to God, and that we need to step away from decolonial thinking, right, because it is too tainted with secular ideologies, especially Marxist and leftist ideologies. And on the other side, and also perhaps sort of modernist interpretations of Islam, which are very militant and perhaps very horizontal. And on the other side, you have decolonial thinkers, perhaps Muslim decolonial thinkers, who see proponents of tradition, so-called traditionalists, as being sort of nostalgic and promoting an escape from the difficult realities of the world through some sort of romanticism, which even unconsciously may be influenced by Orientalist tropes about Islam and otherworldliness, and the idea that Islam is not is not made for this modern world, right? It's something of the past, and we constantly look to the glories of the past and whatnot. We need to get past all of this. Islam is the tradition from which I speak. And I hope, as the Muslim viewers will understand, it should be the tradition from which you speak. And if you're not a Muslim viewer, welcome, marhaba, bienvenidos, bienvenue. It should be a tradition to which you pay attention, because it's the tradition of more than 2 billion of the people who share this planet with you. And it is a tradition I believe has something to offer when it comes to promoting life and beauty and living well and getting past those aspects as practically as possible, without hoping for a utopia, without hoping for perfect justice and perfect mercy and a perfect system. This is the tradition we wish to preserve from modern colonial, ecocidal, genocidal systems which no longer serve anybody's interests, not even those of the core, as far as I'm concerned. Right? We need to get past this. This is the tradition we want to perpetuate and preserve. But not only that, it is the tradition which offers us our best intellectual, emotional, historical, spiritual resources that we can draw upon in confronting the challenge of the age. Being a Muslim, being metaphysically inclined, respecting the past, respecting the roots of our civilization and our tradition, does not imply ignoring the challenges of the day. It never did. The Muslims faced the Mongols, the Muslims faced the Crusades, right? The Muslims faced internal strife and division from the very early period. We must face the challenges of the day. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. Decolonization began a long time ago. Many, many, many decades ago. It began the very moment colonization began. Right here in Ceuta it began. Right here in North Africa it began. It began in the Americas. It began on the Canary Islands. There was never a moment where this new system was not resisted. But the job is not finished. As Ibn Khaldun noted, the problem with defeated empires, because Islam had its empires and its polities, which were a test for Muslims. You see, defeat and victory are a test when it comes to Allah. Wealth is a test. Poverty is a test. Being victorious is a test. Losing is a test. But one of the things Ibn Khaldun, who's well acquainted with the region we're speaking about, he's of Arabian origin, born in Tunisia, lived in Morocco, in Spain, in Egypt. He says the problem is that when people are defeated, they take the mannerisms and the ideas and the culture of those who defeated them. They often consider them to be superior. They think they're superior, that they're more efficient, that they're more effective, and that they're possibly even morally superior to their own traditions, to their own customs, because they lost. You see, many people think Muslims lost, and therefore that's why I'm saying decolonization is not over, because we still have too many people among us and too many tendencies within us, each one of us, to see the core of the world system, the West, as superior because we believe they won the historical battles of the last few centuries. But that depends on how you look at it. If you think that the only victor is Allah, like the Nasrid dynasty that took over Granada until 1492, when the Nasrids took Granada and they built Alhambra. They said, there's no victor but Allah. No matter who wins, Allah is the winner. Here's my question to you. Throughout the whole colonial period, did Islam ever stop growing? The answer is no. Islam actually became the majority religion right here, south of here in West Africa. It had been in West Africa for a long time, but it became the majority religion under French rule. And right now it's continuing to grow. It's continuing to grow in the United States and in the UK and in Spain. Not because of some imperial project. I mean, maybe some people have it, but we're not really there. Nobody actually thinking that we're going to take over. That's just, the West's insecurities about its own capacity to have a tradition that survives. The Muslims can't beat the West right now militarily or geopolitically through immigration or anything. No, but because it's growing, because it appeals to the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, social needs of a growing number of people, and it always has. So where's the loss? Whether you're in power or not, whether you're rich or poor, that doesn't matter. How many souls have become closer to Allah thanks to the spread and the continuation of Islam, despite its distortions, despite the shortcomings of Muslims, and despite the violence of non-Muslims against us and our violence against them? We need to decolonize our minds, because our lands, like here, have been decolonized for a long time. Most lands which are Muslim majority societies have been decolonized for many decades now, but we still have people speaking the languages of the West without speaking the languages of their ancestors. I'm not against multilingualism. I speak many languages, and I love Morocco for all of the languages that you hear here when you're walking around. But that's one thing, but it's another thing to actually be proud of not speaking fluent Arabic, say, when you live in an Arabic country. Or to know more Western musicians or movie filmmakers or actors than you know people from your own land. Because it's not reciprocal. Everybody in Saudi Arabia, where I live and work, all the kids know Drake, but how many Canadians know the artists coming up from Saudi Arabia? That's not because Drake is better than all the artists in the Arabian Peninsula or in the Arabic world or in the Muslim world. No, there's a system that does this, and we need to understand that. We need to go back to Ibn Khaldun and others within our tradition, because this is the way forward for decolonization. You see, there's no dichotomy between tradition, Islam, and decolonization. They're a package deal. We need to finish the deal. It will be better for Muslims. It will be better for non-Muslims if we do it right, if we draw upon the best of our tradition, not the historical mistakes of some of our co-religionists. So, the Islamic tradition offers tools for decolonial deconstruction. It offers tools for post-colonial reconstruction, right? Which, therefore, we have a vision of the world. We have an approach to reality that we know where we want to go once we're finished. We want to go, hopefully, to the best promises of our tradition, the pluralism, the cosmopolitanism of the Islamic tradition. And we will do that, hopefully, reasonably, probably not always. There's many people among us who are zealots and who are not open-minded. But if we respect the love of beauty and mercy and diversity, which is ingrained in our tradition, we will do that in solidarity with non-Muslims. Traditionalists, for example, traditionally inclined Muslims are often favorable to, peaceful, beautiful, interfaith conversations and dialogues and whatnot. Fine, this is beautiful. And decolonial thinkers are open to inter-epistemic solidarity on the margins with other marginalized people. This is beautiful as well. As long as we do not capitulate to another worldview, we need to know who we are, where we come from. We don't need a Marxist genealogy. We have Sayyid al-Hurra, we have an Emir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, we have an Imam al-Shamil. We have so many people that we can look to, that we can have a conversation with Latin American leftists. We can have a conversation with indigenous people rooted in their own traditions in the Great Lakes region of North America. We can have a conversation with all sorts of people. We can have a conversation with Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus. We can have a South-South conversation if we're in the South, right? But these conversations don't always need to be with secular humanists or Christians. The Southeast Asian can have a conversation with an Anishinaabe thinker. Why not, right? So solidarity is important. But here's the very important thing, and the Quran says so. You should not look to people from other traditions to be your allies in the way of thinking that you have the same interest, because you don't have the same worldview. Lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your worldview and I have mine. What does that mean? That doesn't mean a rejection of the other. That means that our interests overlap. And we need to see, and that's why we build coalitions, long-term coalitions. No problem, but we build coalitions on those issues, right? In which there's agreement. But an alliance means quid pro quo. If you agree with me on this issue, I have to agree with you on that issue. And that is where we fail as Muslims. With the global left, with interfaith dialogue, you do not capitulate. You stay yourself and you agree to disagree on things that you don't have the same interests or the same needs or the same worldview or the same approach to reality. That's why the Quran says you have your way of seeing, your deen, and I have mine. Right? Now, of course, if you try and wipe out my way of being, then I will have to defend myself, as would anybody. But this solidarity is important as long as we understand that what we do is we build coalitions along the lines of themes and topics and interests and challenges which are overlapping with other people's. When it comes to areas of profound disagreement, as long as there's no aggression, you have your way of being, your way of seeing, your way of relating to the real, and I have mine. Thank you very much. If you're enjoying my explorations of beauty and excellence in Islamic contexts, please feel free to share the love by liking, commenting, sharing your thoughts, subscribing, and of course, offering a prayer. We're talking about a system, not a culture, right? Not everything that has to do with that system, but there's a system that has grown, which right now is unprecedented in the way it has imposed death on languages, on ecosystems. It's the diversity of life on Earth is rapidly disappearing, and the planet, right? Life on Earth is threatened with extinction. We need to promote life, and life needs diversity beyond ideology. This region right here shows how rigid boundaries, right, rigid borders interrupt an actual continuity, an actual diversity. And this rigidity can kill, it costs lives. Life is diverse. There's no clear borders between cultures, between languages. There are orientations, there's clear orientations. I can be submitting to a law or not. I can be accepting this or accepting that or not. We respect borders. I'm not saying we should take borders away, but the rigidity of them, life is what counts. If the border is there to organize and maintain and manage and favor flows in a way which is acceptable for people on both sides of the given border, that's not what I'm talking about. But when borders become rigid, when ideologies become rigid, when we start to see each other as completely other, as not connected, as though the border somehow makes us part of different realities, part of different universes, part of different ecologies, part of absolutely incompatible cultures, then our ideologies are making us favor a modern, colonial, or other system of death over a system of life. Whether you put that in Islamic or secular or Christian, nationalist or whatever vocabulary, that's what you're doing. We need to promote a system of life. We wish to continue living. We wish to continue living. We wish to promote a system of life as Muslims with others. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Hey, you, best driver in Fnideq. One of the best. My nephew's good too. السلام عليكم.